Right. Welcome everyone to the last webinar for the Eat Well, Be Well. So for today, we're going to be talking about recovery and nutrition. Um, a lot of the things that we talk about today, some of the things will be repeat from the first 3 weeks that we talked about, but there are some new things in here as well. So let's begin, but welcome. All right, so for the first part, we're going to talk about stress and types of stress. We talked about this a little bit from last week when we talked about gut health. And then we're going to go through some of the nutritional components again. And then we will do a recap and then the challenge, which is always optional. And so let's get started. So stress and types. So we know what stress is. I know a lot of us know what stress is, but stress is a syndrome of which it consists of all changes in the biological system. So whether it's the physical stress that like we put our bodies under, or it's stress that's more emotional or psychological. So especially within the past couple of years, that we've all gone through, more emotional and mental like stress, and so that mental health is really important. So we will move on to the next. All right, so this general adaptation syndrome, or as we call it, GAS. So this was identified by a gentleman named Hans Selye, and so pretty much it's just how stress works within the body. And so when I'm talking about stress, that I'm talking about like the chronic stress, the stress that's just very long term. And so that's why it says here that our stress response system defends and then it fatigues. So within this first kind of like red box or kind of orange looking box where it says the stressor occurs, this is where the cortisol is released in the system, and so this is where we become alarmed to the situation that is going on. And so then when we head into this like yellow section where it says the body's resistance to stress can only last so long, so that's where we start dealing with elevated heart rate. Our blood pressure starts to increase. Maybe we start to get, like a little bit like we're like sweating, or maybe it's like a cold hands, clammy hands sort of situation. Those would be physical responses to stress. And so then that last phase of phase 3, we can only last so long, to where by that point in time, we're just fatigued. We're tired, we're worn out. Maybe we just, maybe we just break down. Whether, we just physically cry or, we just want to be alone. And so we will move into the next piece. And so that was just, just stress in a nutshell. Now we'll just kind of talk about stress and how it pertains to to our exercise and to the foods that we eat. So the negative effects of physical stress are, that we feel very low energy. It makes it hard for us to get through the day, or we get through the day, but maybe we're just not as productive. Frequent colds and infections. If again, chronic stress, if we're always under a lot of stress, we just start to wear down our bodies. And so we might become, more prone to getting sick as a possibility. Headaches, possibly from the tension that we create within our upper back and our necks, maybe from possibly not sitting, with good posture, which is important, but, even myself included, that I have to like constantly remind myself to, sit up or to get up and walk around. Some of us can suffer from insomnia. especially if the stress gets really bad. Aches, pains, those kind of like mysterious aches and pains when we're like trying to go through our head of like, okay, why am I experiencing this? Is there something going on? And then, we might be more prone to higher risk injury. If we're really tired and we come into the fitness center or we go to the gym and we're just not feeling 100%, you might do something to where you're like, oh, and like a stumble, like let's say you stumble, you sprain your ankle, and maybe you correlate that with sorry, as I trip over my words today. So you're kind of correlating that sprained ankle with the fact that you were like tired and maybe that you just weren't paying attention to like how you were walking, is where I'm going with that. All right. So then let's talk about the positive effects of like the physical stress from exercise. So this is not exactly the chronic stress that I'm referring to. This is more of the positive stress that comes from exercise. It's that impact that we place on our body when we're up and we're moving, no matter what sort of exercise that we are doing. So the positive effects would be, a better mood, more energy. There might be some muscle growth and some muscle strength depending on the activities that you choose. Some are different than others. Increased cardiovascular health. If we're walking or if we're doing other things that get that heart rate up there, and also with the volume of the oxygen that we take into our lungs, maybe we breathe a lot better and we feel more energy that way because of the increased oxygen that we bring into the system. We sleep better. The activities of daily living, they're just easier to like do. Going up and down stairs, you don't feel as winded, maybe from the increase of exercise, or maybe your balance is better when it comes to picking up something off the ground. So always trying to think of like your exercises and those like functional movements in comparison to the activities that you do, day to day. Better balance, like I said, and increased memory. So we will move on. All right, so we're going to switch gears just a little bit. So we're still talking about positive effects of exercise. When we talk about, sleeping, and again, from like a stress standpoint, whether you're just not sleeping as well or you are suffering from insomnia, like those are the negative impacts of what stress does. But when we're not under stress, and the benefits of sleep are that we just feel more charged up. We feel you know like we're ready to take on the day, we're ready to like get things done. We don't feel as stiff. Well, maybe we might feel as stiff, kind of first thing in the morning. Sometimes I feel just a little stiff getting out of bed. Takes me a moment, but doesn't take very long. And sometimes that could be that inflammation in the body. So if we sleep well, we don't notice that as much. So then recommendations, which we've heard day in and day out, just trying to be consistent with the sleep schedule, trying to go to bed at the same time, which I know can be challenging, especially if we have work schedules that might be all over the place, or maybe it's just hard to shut the brain off, and try to unwind before we go to bed, making sure that we avoid tech devices or cell phones and such a couple of hours before bed, or at least putting it into like the lowest light setting. So that way it's kind of like nighttime mode. So that way that light that is entering through the eye from your cell phone isn't stimulating too much to where it just causes you to be more awake. But again, when we're trying to shut the brain off, it doesn't help if we're like just constantly scrolling and looking through things. Maybe it gets our brain thinking about stuff. And that could be challenging, even for myself. I did a tech fast a couple weeks ago for 24 hours, and that was the hardest thing for myself because I think that I am very tech dependent, but it's a work in progress. And then lastly is purchasing some sort of smart alarm. It's pretty much like a way of like kind of easing the body out of like sleep without it being like this harsh, like, alarm, with like that very harsh beep and you just wake up startled and then all of a sudden you feel kind of stressed. It's kind of like if you woke up late and you were just like running to get, ready and right out the door. So let's move on to the next one. All right. So we're going to talk about, again, the whole point about this conversation is about recovery. And so we'll talk about different recovery pieces as well, or aids, things that can assist in, recovering quicker. So examples of this would be things like compression socks, compression sleeves, or like compression boots. So the point of anything with like a compression to it, whether it's a sock, a sleeve, a boot, is that it's supposed to kind of push that blood flow, from our peripheral, parts of our body, which are our arms, our legs, our hands, our feet, and pushing it more towards the center of the body, closer to the heart. So that way it's bringing oxygen into those muscles that are working. So again, that blood flow is being like it's being increased. It's kind of being forced, towards the center of the body, just to recirculate back down. And so then the second bullet point where we talk about like the metabolic waste, it's like the lactic acid. It's the things that cause soreness. It's maybe, the free radicals and whatever other, sort of metabolic waste that we deal with in our body that sometimes can, cause impair, especially when it comes to like our muscles. If we have lactic acid buildup, it's kind of like a roadblock for those muscles. And so if we don't stretch, if we don't drink enough water, if we just don't do, those things to kind of get that stuff out of our system, it can kind of affect how we perform. And so the last one is just increased proprioception in some individuals. And so that proprioception is kind of that connection with the body, especially when you think of like, how you move, how you move in space. It's kind of like if I asked you to close your eyes and I asked you to kind of stick your hands out and go one finger at a time, touching your nose while you're standing with your eyes closed. That would be spatial proprioception. That would be you trying to see where your finger is in relation to as it comes to your nose. So that's what proprioception is, just in general. Not to confuse you, not to get too science. All right. So let's move on to more strategies for recovery. So here we talk about stretching and mobility. And I know that we're very familiar with, like the static stretching, making sure that we do these stretches after our workouts. Again, stretching helps keep us mobile, helps keep us, just feeling a lot more loose. It can help with swelling, especially if we tend to feel it more so in a specific area. Maybe it's our back, maybe it's our neck, Maybe it's through our hips or our core, that we tend to feel most of that tension. And so we want to make sure that we hold a stretch. Um, maybe it's for 15 seconds. Maybe it's just really tight. So we don't want to overdo it. So maybe start with 15, eventually make your way to 30, and then to be able to hold it longer. All right. Foam rolling is great. It can be a little kind of like it catches you off guard, just because you notice it when that, like the pressure of the foam roller is maybe pressing against a tight area. You just got to learn to breathe through it. As you kind of let it work out that knot, in the body. Again, it's that sort of roadblock that I was telling you about with the lactic acid. It's that waste buildup, and it just kind of blocks the muscles from working in a proper way. So foam rolling relaxes the nervous system, breaks up knots and adhesions. Again, those would be those roadblocks that I was talking about. Releases the fascia. So fascia would be like the muscles. They come in layers. So we just want to make sure that we're stretching that out. And then just can be performed before and after workouts. Same with stretching. You could do a little bit of light stretching if you don't have a foam roller or any other sort of aid to help you with recovery. So then there's also active recovery. So anything that's more of a low intensity. So like, let's say if you worked out for 3 days, but you don't necessarily want to sit, but you still want to keep moving. There are other activities that you could do that would be more low intensity. So whether it's walking, whether it's, riding a bike, swimming, any sort of maybe recreational activity, maybe it lasts you about 20 to 30 minutes, and it's kind of easy, in the sense of the exertion levels. So that RPE scale of 3 to 5, 1 is like super easy, and and then 10 is like very, very difficult. We definitely do not want to aim for 10. We want to keep it at 5 or less. All right, so let's speak into the nutrition piece. So like I said in the very beginning, some of these things will be repeated. Again, it's kind of all about kind of getting that into your head, just so that just so it sticks. 'Cause it's just like changes. When we try to make changes, it takes a few times before we get it. So that's why we tend to repeat the information within the past like 3 weeks. So nutrition, so how we feel and how we perform can be affected by how we eat. And so an example of this would be, or at least the example that I always tend to use would be, more like describing like children who don't eat breakfast. They go to school, they're not as focused, maybe their grades reflect that, maybe they're more tired, they have a hard time focusing, maybe the concentration isn't there. It's just like with us. Maybe we, as adults, maybe we miss a meal, or maybe we're not eating enough for breakfast or lunch or dinner. And so what ends up happening with that is this low energy availability. And so it's the intake and the output are the two factors of this equation. So we're not taking in enough, but maybe we output too much. And so then therefore we create this deficit, that really affects like that low energy on the body. And so some of those examples of the effects could be like a skeletal, effect on the body. So when I talk about like certain, minerals like calcium, or, vitamin D, those things that are super important when it comes to, keeping those bones strong and making sure that we, can kind of keep that whole aspect of like osteoporosis or osteopenia, anything with like bone loss, we don't want that, especially as we, get older. We still want to be able to, be mobile, to be functioning, and not have those issues with the skeletal system. Our hormones can be affected. An example of this would be that whole low fat diet from back in the 1960s, 1970s, where they really kind of touted that low fat, diet was good for you. But the thing is that there are healthy fats that you could be eating. And those would be good for the body. They're good for the hormones. They're good for hair, skin, nails. Just generally, hormones control a lot of the things that, that we, well, do and feel. The immune system, keeping that from being run down. So whether it's we're eating too much sugar or, we're kind of running down the body, maybe it's too much physical activity, maybe there's just too much stress going on in the body, those sorts of things can run the immune system down, especially as we get into the colder months. Obviously depends on where you live, that we're not outside as much. And so we don't get the vitamin D from the sun. And so we have to supplement it. Otherwise that risk of us, getting a cold or getting the flu, could increase. So we just want to make sure we take care of ourselves. And then last is recovery and performance. Those can be affected, um, with our body when it comes to, maybe we're not drinking enough water or not getting enough liquids, in our diet from like the foods that we eat. So veggies, fruits, those all contain water in them. Maybe it's, the other foods that we eat as well, that could be affecting how we recover and perform. All right. So again, these next few slides are going to be repeats again of the things that we've talked about from week 1 to week 2. And so we'll just kind of breeze right through them. And so again, we know that carbohydrates are fuel. They, fuel the brain, they fuel our body for, the activities that we're doing, whether they're moderate activities or maybe they're higher intensity type activities. So depends on our goals, depends on the intensity and the duration of time of that activity. All right. So again, whole grains, minimally processed items, and then just getting 3 grams of fiber per serving. So then we talk about getting protein. So protein that builds, builds muscle tissue. It keeps, the immune system supported and maintains, a lot of those other functions of the body where protein is needed in order to obviously repair itself. Aiming to kind of limit saturated fats, so picking more grilled or baked versus fried. And then also, doing things that are skinless versus having the skin on them. And then also this whole, the less legs, the better. So it's kind of like saying that beef, like picking beef wouldn't be as healthy as like chicken, because chicken has less saturated fat than beef. But obviously some of us, for example, for myself, like I try to avoid eating red meat the best that I can, but that's just by personal choice. And so, it's just the options that, or the things that we do in our life that, that reflect how we eat. So again, just the quality protein choices. So whether something's grilled, baked, broiled, so again, the chicken, the turkey, the eggs, the healthy fish, the cold water fish, certain dairy products, assuming that you're not lactose intolerant, shellfish, anything like that, as long as you don't have a shellfish allergy. But also even, quality protein can come from, plant-based products like tofu, nuts, seeds, beans, stuff like that. So then fats are to protect. So again, when I was talking about the healthy hair, skin, and nails, keeping those hormone levels up, they help with, keeping joints like mobile and fluid. So that way we just don't feel as stiff. They help with absorption of certain vitamins, especially fat soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K. And then they just help keep us full, and they help regulate our blood sugar and keeping that energy, kind of more drawn out versus being something of a short nature. So it's kind of like eating like a candy bar. You might feel energized for 5 minutes, but then it's just going to drop. So that sustainability is not there. So again, brain power, mental clarity, memory, those sorts of things come from healthy fats and omega-3 foods. And then just kind of a quick refresher of what those healthy fats, walnuts, pecans, any sort of nut or seed, avocados, cold water fish, certain oils, whether it's olive oil, or pumpkin seeds, or any other seed, green olives, stuff like that. All right. So, and then lastly, again, that the fruits and vegetables, those are going to prevent, the issues that we run in with, like whether it affects our immunity or it affects, like our skeletal system. So, again, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, they are the support staff. Again, that's kind of like we said in the very beginning about, food is our superpower. And so it's like, there's a saying that says, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy, thy food. And so it's all about, again, what we put into our body and what we get out of it. So picking, bright colored vegetables, getting enough of those servings of vegetables. So 8 servings of veggies to 4 servings of fruits, even though some of us prefer fruit more than vegetables. So at least getting 3 colors on the plate per serving. And then herbs and spices have a lot of antioxidants as well. So I threw this slide in there because I wish I had thrown this slide into last week, just because I think that sometimes it's helpful when we talk about the certain colors of fruits and vegetables and, what they do within the body, and so I had said that we tend to eat more reds and oranges and yellows than we do, of like the purples and the blues, and the greens. And so again, whether it's the green that helps detoxify the body, fights free radicals, or those kind of like those bullets that are kind of flying around the body, kind of willy-nilly. And so by eating greens and other, fruits and vegetables, that we can help kind of limit those, those so-called bullets kind of flying around the body. But I will send this in an email separately, just so that you have that, because I think this is kind of a nice way of seeing it too. And then just, I won't go through like, again, what the fruits and vegetables are that are good for us by those colors, but I just kind of threw this in here. And so, and then just talking about like the portions and the plates based on the activity, so if you're a moderately active person, you just want to get, some grains into the diet for the energy, making sure a quarter of that plate is at least protein, and then trying to get more fruits and veggies onto the plate and healthy fats as well. And so that's for a moderate active a moderately active person versus a very active person who could use more carbohydrates, and the protein and the fruits and vegetable portion is equal by 25%. Um, you know, they could probably increase the healthy fats too if they didn't want to eat as many carbohydrates from that. And then just someone with like a weight loss goal, or maybe someone who's not as active, is just getting more fruits and vegetables, period, and on the plate. You know, a quarter of the protein and a quarter of the carbohydrates with that same amount of fats. Again, you could probably increase the fats and lessen the carbs a little bit, you know, for that same kind of sustained energy. And so then just a recap of the things that we talked about. So the fiber, you know, 3 grams of fiber from the carbohydrates, the protein sources within each meal, you know, including anti-inflammatory foods, and then just getting more fruits and veggies into our diet, right?